Woohoo. No, we record. That was our problem.
Okay. Happy Chinese New Year, I believe it is today. Is that yes? Yes, it is. Year of the pig. There we go. Year that my boat died. There we go. Okay. Tuesday, Feb 5, 7:05. Showing will begin. We are calling to order. We have quorum. Have a movement to adopt the agenda. Thank you. Thank you. Any changes to the agenda?
Just one question on the agenda. Item 4, that would be 8.4, staff reports. So there's an in-camera report that associates to the same item.
Mm-hmm.
So is it possible we could do this after we've discussed the in-camera part?
Definitely. If you get here and you have any questions or want to discuss the materials that are in the closed materials
Yeah.
pertaining to this item,
Yeah.
please indicate and suggest to the chair that you'd like to table the item till such time as you have an opportunity to question in closed.
Sure.
So-
Once we get there.
Neville, pre-guessing that we're going to table this.
Yes.
Okay, done. So we'll table, flip this over. A4, so that will be a table and.
Until after closed
Until
discussion.
after closed and report. Actually, after closed period, okay. All right, any other change, yes?
So in addition to staff reports, 3 of them. One is essentially a discussion item. It'll be the CFO with respect to BDO presentation of the audit.
This is number 5, Peter?
Yeah, so this will be 5.
BDO,
Presentation of audit, set date and time is essentially what we're talking about.
okay.
The next one will be CFO verbal report re municipal grant presentations. And number 6.
Okay.
Number 7 will be CAO verbal report re UBCM resolutions.
Okey dokey. Any other changes as I go around? No? Yes, more?
Just, no, not really, just pointing out that the CFO will have some on-table materials with respect to the solid waste, water and sewer budgets when we get there, just with alternate scenarios, etc.
No samples?
Please, not.
Okay.
Can I add, I might have it on table if you're willing on the committee report 1I, DI.
Number C1, I.
No, this would be D1 or DI.
where are we?
Committees.
Oh, committee. Yep.
So,
Sorry, I thought it's already there.
Oh, yeah, it's just a little on table.
Oh, on table.
We already have.
Okay, so we have a table item, okay. Copies for the gallery, I'm sure? Good,
I think I've got enough.
making sure. All right, so I think we butchered this one. Anything else to go? Going. Mover, seconder, carried, all in favor of the agenda, thanks, we're done. Public part, there is none. Public delegation, nobody hiding out there? No, we are good. Review and approval of the minutes, item number 5. Starting on page 5. If I may start.
certainly.
Firstly, compliments to CAO Dion for his memory of the events. And I think, and I mean that sincerely, because it was a big meeting and he went through a lot of audio stuff to get to this. I think from my view, it's not the best use of your time, so if you guys can use Raincoast or somebody else, I think I would prefer that. So leave that alone. And I have a variety of minor changes, but I'll let somebody else go first. Nope, Norm, zip.
So,
Sorry, Councillor Barmier. Councillor Abbott.
sorry, I was reading ahead. We had matters arising?
No, we're on the agenda.
Minutes. We're on
Am I
the,
going too fast for you?
I will try to pay attention.
Passing, okay. Counselor?
No issues.
Small bunch of stuff which I will hand to Shauna, which is on page 6. It's Mrs. Zordigund's name is spelled differently, and there's a couple of apostrophe S's missing. Thank you.
There's also the date at the top of it, of each page is incorrect. It'll be changed to
Okay.
January 22nd from December 18th.
There we go, and I have no other,
Oh, sorry. One other thing is on page 9 of 104. I got a little mixed up with the order of the water, sewer, and solid waste and the percentages associated with each. So that should actually read with sewer at 5% and solid waste at 1.5% in
Thank you.
both the text summary and in the actual resolution itself. So that needs to be amended accordingly.
thank
Should be
you.
5.5 and 1.5.
And Peter, for your notes, when you're doing the film policy review, can you kind of stick this in one of the addendums so we can
Certainly, yeah.
kind of go backwards, refresh? Thank you. And then go over there, and, on page 10 of 104, and this would be Mayor, God, I think I talked a lot, 5B6. And it says Ecom Board Representative, and then verbal, and then it was blank.
Oh, yeah.
And it would be, and I'll give this to Shauna, discussion between Lions Bay and North Shore mayors as to who would be the representative. And I have no other changes. Anything else? Thank you, everybody. Gone. Anybody? Last call? Nope. Motion to accept. Second, all in favor? Done. And then we get business arising from the minutes. If I'm kind of on a roll here. If I could, I have one, and this is for Peter to say yes or no to. It's just because it's a high-profile thing, and this would be it's on page 7 of 104. And this was about this quiet paving product. Whatever happens with that, I think that's kind of a, staff to inquire with MOT as to the schedule for repaving, which I think Councillor Abbott said, I don't think I've ever seen them pave it, but I haven't. So we'll all be there for the pavement christening of it. Okay, so that's just and it's only because it's a high-profile piece that I do it. Thank you. All right, any other business arising from the minutes?
I've got a couple. On item number 2, on page 5, the use of clause 91N. It was a little clunky last time, but I do think it's a good use. I would like to. I hope everyone had a chance to read the Ombudsman's best practices, and I'd like to suggest that we do that when needed, or frequently, or even make as a default if we needed to. And the other thing in that report was reporting out, and specifically the part where they recommend you report out on items once the time has gone by, then the reason for putting them in camera is no longer valid. So, for example, we've never reported out on the bid documents we got in the tank, right? But we already awarded the contract. The numbers are on DC bid. It's public knowledge. But I would have thought once we'd awarded the contract and moved on, we could have gone back to that and reported out what the numbers were.
Perhaps we could have that conversation in close.
Okay, sure.
Okay, can you bring that to the agenda on the close then, Councillor Abbott? I think you said you had a couple.
A couple, yeah. 12A, the encroachment application we received. I feel as a group we need to, I understand that we're trying to be considerate to everyone and someone losing money because he started a job. But I think if we always make the exception that we're going to jump through the process because someone forgot or didn't know you're supposed to get a permit, We don't have the chance to be thorough. I have discussed with NICE since. There was supposed to be a culvert there. I don't see how there's a culvert there if it does work, how water gets into it. We didn't have a chance to do that review because the guy had money ticking and his excavator started. So I think there's... Sure.
So right now, I think, I'm not trying to cut you off on this one, Councillor Abbott. I think on this one, whether it was urgent or not, or whether we had all the information or not, it would be my practice if there's people in the gallery that might be waiting through for an hour and a quarter, I would bump them ahead just,
Oh no, I'm not talking about bumping them ahead.
I mean, it's just a bumping ahead piece for
No,
me.
I'm not. The bump ahead was fine.
Okay.
I was happy with that. It was the fact that we rushed through the actual process of the application for a permit because the guy had started the work. I've seen the same thing happen on tree permits and so on. I think we should tell people there's a process. If they don't understand the process, stop work, come back, mobilise when you've got your permit.
So we did have a discussion about this matter, at the staff meeting yesterday. And really, from a staff perspective, what it comes down to on these applications for us is a case of ensuring that the village's interests are protected into the future. So where there is potential infrastructure conflicts, we will always ensure that the village's interests are protected, such that if we need access to that ditch or that culvert or whatever the case may be, that land, we will ensure that there is nothing in our way, and preferably not even any kind of pavers or anything like that, preferably gravel, which is what we're doing on this one. Where there are no conflicts, no infrastructure at all, which is the case sometimes, it's just, but we still want people to understand, hey, you're on our infrastructure, or you're on our property, on the highway right away, and you're going to need to have an encroachment agreement. That being said, there's a couple where it's not even necessary to do that. But for the most part, our key focus is understanding and knowing that what are the potential uses for a particular area that is requested for an encroachment license, and what are the village's interests. And if we understand fully what the situation is, regardless of how fast it is, if we can make that assessment and determine that, okay, well, we don't like these last minute things any more than you do. Mm-hmm. However, if we're comfortable that we have protected the village's interests and there's not going to be any prejudice to our interests in proceeding, then we will recommend allowing it. But I agree, it's preferable to ensure that people understand the process before they get going. And we do try to nip that in the bud, and the building inspector is a key part of talking to people and ensuring that they understand that, oh, you better talk to the CAO or the public works manager about that, because you might need an encroachment agreement. So we do try to do that, but as I say, our modus operandi is always village interest protected.
Agreed. It was just in this case, in the meeting last minute, there was a suggestion, we've got a culvert in there. We'll go out and check the culvert and make sure it's not impacted.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was done. And if there is a culvert there, it goes across 6 properties. It's a subsurface drain that runs a hell of a long way. I don't know if it's there. We didn't have a chance to vet that. We took the face value. And did they report back, or do we have a report on the culvert? I don't know.
Well, we didn't ask them to dig up the road. So an investigation of whether or not there is culverts along that stretch is something that we can do at any time, because we protected the interest, and we can go back. There's nothing to stop us from going back tomorrow or next week or next year and digging up that section of road. Unfortunately, the whole issue coming to light at the last moment like that is a bit of a sad commentary on the village's records with respect to drainage infrastructure. So, there's that as well.
I had one other one. On page 9, down at the bottom, this is about the Saplings Outlaw program. One of the items to done was provision of opportunity to be heard for any residents opposed to proposed agreement. I'm not suggesting there are anyone or will be anyone, but I'm not aware of how that happened, because the notice that went out didn't ask people to respond. It just stated what we've done. So was the public invited to do that?
That's the intent of the notice, is that people are given notice that the village intends to do something. I have to go back and look at the wording, but you're saying that there was
It
no
doesn't say anything
specific
about, please
invitation.
let us know how you
Right.
feel, or send your concerns to this, or do that.
Right.
It just says
Yeah.
this is what's happened.
Yeah.
It's almost like a fait accompli. So we don't
Yeah.
really do what we stated here.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, we do what most municipalities do, which is reiterate the provisions of the statute with respect to notice, filling in the blanks more or less as to what it is we're giving notice about. But some municipalities do a better job of that and provide the essential information that meets the statutory notice requirements while also being a little bit more user-friendly, so to speak. So we could certainly look at how we put those notices out and look at whether or not we can make them a little more user-friendly so that people are, feel that they're, open to
And on
respond.
that point, not to belabor it too long, but in response to my article from last week, the Midge Update, I've had a couple of comments, and one written, one email, suggesting just that there is, people know where you can go on the website to fill in a form to respond to something, but a simple click and a short comment that is in a more user-friendly way would be more likely to encourage people to respond. That was one of the emails I got. But we
I'm
can,
not sure I follow completely, but we could perhaps
on my
follow up.
communications piece, we'll talk about it.
Mm, Yeah, okay.
Are you thinking like the feedback thing or something like that?
Yeah, so we have the feedback thing, but people think it's kind of clunky. It's a form. You have to go and then formally fill in this form, as opposed to some sort of notice board or some sort of easier one-click response.
I think the only meaningful feedback is feedback with an identification. So I think feedback, anonymous feedback is you might as well throw it out. It has no meaning. Because you don't know if it's from a villager, you don't know where it's coming from. So I personally think feedback is good as long as people have the balls to say, and my name is, and I live in Lions Bay. If you're going to be anonymous, your feedback is irrelevant.
I think it has more credence if someone puts their name to it, but there might be good reasons not to. But people are comfortable putting their name to it.
But we're in a public realm. We're talking about public issues, so people should have that much courage.
Other municipalities have simple,
Let's not debate this
it's
just
not
now.
simple, easy ways to respond to things like notice boards.
Um,
Just put things up.
On this last point, Neville, great article, and thank you. I think whoever writes articles, sometimes it resonates with well, and Norm's right, we don't know who's receiving it all the time, so could be anybody. Or they picked that up off the net and did whatever they did, who knows what. But I think certainly the feedback when you sign your name and your political email address is below. Are you, just quick on this one, are you suggesting that you want more than that?
No?
Okay.
I just, we'll talk about it after.
Okay,
Some of
'cause
the ideas
I-
are to make it more efficient and easier.
Because I think you're on the right track on a whole bunch of stuff for that article.
I just want to, just one comment with respect to the feedback form. There are advantages to its use in that there are parts of the form where the person is invited to ask, to let us know if they want to be followed up with. Some people do, some people don't, which is helpful information for us. Nye, was there anything else? I mean, we had this discussion about the form a little while ago.
Yeah, there was quite a
Can't
bit of
remember all
thought
the
put
points.
into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, something we can come back to and talk about further.
Okay, Councillor Rabbit, I know that this is a passion of yours, so I know we're going to hear more about this whenever you think it's right to
Yes.
do whatever it is.
I'm happy to move it on.
Okay,
Just one last thing.
I'm
Page
holding you
10.
to the last thing.
This is the last one on this section. Page 10, item 7. The webinar. Is there a report from that? About the emergency, staff are taking part in a webinar regarding emergency notification system. Is there some sort of verbal report or a report of some sort?
No?
No? Okay. I wouldn't mind some feedback on if there was anything.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't make notes, but maybe others did. I don't know.
How many attended the webinar?
No, Haley did.
The whole staff did, Susan.
Oh,
The whole
myself,
staff, okay.
Just,
I did from home.
Yeah.
But,
Okay. Are you fine with that, Councillor Abbott?
Sure.
Good, and on that, since nobody's been, can I have you, are you concluded with this section?
Thank you.
Everybody else, we're done with unfinished business? Sorry, business arising. We're now on to unfinished business. And CAO Dion, you're up first.
Okay, yeah, I've followed up since the last meeting with Simons, but I haven't reconnected with her, so to speak, so we're just on hold for the moment on that one.
Thank you. Councillor
I
Cunliffe?
have put it to the PAC chair and I believe vice chair and have not heard a response yet.
From memory, do you recall when this had a drop dead date?
March 31st.
Lots of time. Good, thank you. Carry it forward. I think everybody agrees. Okay, we're done with that. Reports. Who doesn't like a good wastewater treatment plant annual report review?
So real quick, this is the annual report required per our operating permit from the Ministry of Environment. All parameters were within the allowable limits. During one of the maintenance visits in December, staff noted wear on the sprocket and chain. Those have been ordered and are in our operating budget to repair. That's pretty much it.
Works manager, is there anything you want to highlight in this particular report that just is your favorite page or anything like that?
No. Dive video was conducted. Next one's due in 5 years. No issues were found. No significant issues. Most of it's just minor.
We're going to actually talk a little bit further about the condition of the water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, when we get to the next report.
Good. Motion to receive.
Oh, question?
Yep.
On page 27 of 104, the diagram of the sewer system overview. It seems to be missing one. I understand there's a property or two on Ocean View that have actually looked back to it as well.
Oh, yeah, we're missing Mr.
Mr. Sredsky.
Sredsky's.
So what you're looking at, the diagram that you're looking at, shows the mains. It does not show the individual services. There is a property, 270 Ocean View, that is connected to the sewer system across the creek. And that's a service, it's not a main, that's why it doesn't show.
Oh, I was just
Is
figuring
it
out the
running
length.
through the drainage culvert by any chance?
No, no.
Is there a nice one right where we could put a culvert next to it?
I was just thinking though, with the length of the run though, would it not be sized like a main?
No, it's a small service.
Is it small?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Good catch, Councillor Bain, and I myself liked page 44, the outfall reference photos. Can't go wrong with green. Can I have a motion to receive? Thank you. Seconder? No further discussion? No? Okay. All in favor? Done. Thank you. Moving on to the next one, which is the KG wastewater treatment plant replacement and CAO Dion.
Okay, I trust everyone's had a chance to review this. And what we have is a facility that is nearing its end of life, operating about 90% at this point in time. And 5 to 10 year max on remaining life, with additional repairs, was the expectation at the time the report was written. Since the report was written, we've had some further issues that I'm going to let Public Works Manager Jaffer speak to.
So we had a catastrophic failure of a member of one of the media packs. It wasn't visible, it was hidden inside the actual HDPE media pack panels. It snapped. When it snapped, half of it went off to the side, and as the drum rotated, it got stuck in the concrete, in the edge of the concrete and aluminum, and tore the disc apart. So the motor was torqued. The shaft wasn't spinning, so we've had to shut the treatment plant down. This morning, I reported it to the Ministry of Environment, and I called the Provincial Emergency Response Line to report that we're in non-compliance with the treatment plant. We have contacted the manufacturer, and we are sourcing the repair parts to rebuild that first medium pack with no response back yet. We're still waiting. But the plant is not operational.
You reported it as a what?
When you have a failure of a treatment plant, you have to report it to the Provincial Emergency Program. It's a requirement. So it's been reported to the Ministry of Environment for our permit, and also to the Provincial Emergency Reporting Program.
So, was there a spill though? Did we put it into the environment? Was that
There will be,
There will be.
yeah.
It's just gathering volume as we speak.
So do we
Well,
just pump it
Post
out?
doesn't gather water.
Well, so the treatment, yeah, so the treatment process is now, it's probably operating at about 25%. The primary clarifier actually acts as the first stage of the treatment process. So that's working. It's the biological part of the treatment that's not working. The discs are not rotating. The bacteria need oxygen and submergence in wastewater, so that's what that disc does. The fact that the discs aren't rotating, bacteria it'll turn into an anaerobic situation. Anoxic bacteria will take over and start to go septic. And as the wastewater comes into that, it starts putting that septic wastewater out into Kelvin Grove. So that's why we have to report it.
Lucky it's not July.
Do you
So when
increase-
is the plant maintained last?
Our maintenance program is once a month inspection, yeah. So it's confined space, we have to go in with our gear, respirators, we grease the fittings, we take a look at all the parts, etc. But this was like tucked in, there was no way even, yeah, no way we could have seen
Some
this.
came loose or was?
No, it just snapped, rust, metal fatigue, yeah. Yeah.
That's too bad.
Manager Jaffer, we reported this to the Kelvin Grovers.
Negative, yeah. We're still waiting to find out what the replacement timeline is gonna be, but we will put something out in the village update.
For Friday,
Yeah,
Windlers or Dry, wherever we are.
yeah.
Okay.
Are you required to increase the chlorine on the outfall at all?
There is no chlorine on the outfall.
Or in the second, or the last chamber, do you chlorinate it?
No, never have.
I thought I saw something in here.
The chamber was installed when the plant was installed, but it's never been a requirement of the permit. It's never been operational.
So with that rosy news, we can move on with respect to the options. Well, first of all, I guess the desired result. This is a direction request report, which leads us. Ultimately, we want to get to a desired result. And the desired result is a well-planned, sufficiently funded replacement of the wastewater treatment plant, which provides short, medium, and long-term service capacity options for Kelvin Grove and ultimately all of Lions Bay. That's how I wrote it. Council is free to agree or disagree with that statement. I think it's a statement which provides a number of different options. It's a best-case scenario, desired result. It's a long-term it's a forward-looking, long-term statement with short and medium-term objectives as well. And I don't know if council wants to jump in at this point and talk about whether that is the desired result, or if you want to just move on to the options to achieve that result.
So you're saying, you're talking about whether a study is still in the picture?
No, that's one of the options to achieve the desired result. So I just, in terms of that more or less motherhood statement, does council agree with that statement?
I'm just wondering whether ultimately all of the Lions Bay part doesn't get in the way of what we really need to do. And that sounds like an idealistic kind of goal that maybe we can afford to investigate now when we're trying to fix one treatment system for a small visit.
Councillor Abbott, if you'll let me go next on this one, because good report by staff, really good, and I'm sorry about the unfortunate news. I think on the, I don't think it is motherhood. It is the objective to get to the desired perfect state, and I think that's what the residents deserve and that's what we all want. So my thinking here to laser in on this so we don't talk about this for hours and hours is that there are two things, in my view, of the variety of recommendations. One is, Kelvin Grove has the immediate and pressing problem right now, and sooner better than later. So we need to do it for them, period. If we're going to enlist an engineering study, and we can debate about the whole village, because in the sake of, let's say, the councillors who are not in Kelvin Grove, let's say you just replaced your septic tank last year, you have a different view of taking care of your sewage situation. But I believe, and I guess just to refresh for the new councillors as well as the old, we have previously had a development above the highway that has currently gone quiet but may come forward again, and who knows in what shape that is. So they may be part of this in the future. We also have our works yard opportunity, which we haven't explored yet, but it's on the page to see where we get to. So that would likely also be, I don't know this, but I'm going to presume it's some form of multi-residential, which would hook into the plant. There are also, there is another property very close in the Kelvin Grove area, which would also facilitate multi-residential as well too. And those people have had on and off again conversations with CO Dion. So I think certainly we need to know as much as possible as we can on this whole thing. So for me, relatively, do I need, this is me, the Mr. and Mrs. McLaughlin hat, do I need to know what the sewage ability for a universal sewer system is? I'm not putting my personal card in that one. I'll take care of my own sewage system. But I think we should move forward with the study wholeheartedly and quickly, and I'm going to guess we'll get an idea of what it costs. The second thing that I see here is that the sewage fund is going to take a big hit out of their reserves pending this emergency situation. And when I hear things like scarce, hard to get, broken, and catastrophic, these don't sound like counter words like thrifty, easy to obtain, and gosh, it'll be done tomorrow. So I'm thinking there's going to be a big number to this one, not a small number, so that budget may be somewhat challenged. So to the second option, if I'm going through, I'm kind of morphing the two of them here. I think that we should move forward with the study. I think there are reasons that we should get a very robust study. And while I personally would put a lot less credence other than nice to know stuff, how it would fit into maybe Brunswick or up in Timbertop or in Upper Ocean View, I think it should be done. And to that extent, I think that one particular area has a very pressing need now, and for the rest, there's maybe not a pressing need right now, but there's also a very strong possibility that within the next few years, there is going to be development. So I would be proposing something along the lines of a 50-50 split between all of the village and the sewage fund in terms of splitting the cost for the engineering study.
Well, if I may, the proposal here is to pay for the engineering study from the sewer surplus unrestricted reserve. So the taxpayers have contributed to that reserve in Kelvin Grove, and it's appropriate that the funding for that study come from that unrestricted reserve. If we can lessen the amount through an infrastructure planning grant or through an FCM grant, then that's great. But I think, I'm not quite sure what the 50% from the village would come from, other than from that reserve.
I see it as an operational issue in our budget. This would be one of the things that I guess we're doing it in advance of the budget. But I think that we're not able to talk about development at this time because it's a road it's a patch down the road yet. But at the same time, a very robust, the Kelvin Grove people don't need a whole study in doing the whole village.
Well, except
I
that
agree with that.
it would be,
It doesn't make sense if we're looking at having a study to encompass the entire village shouldered on just one segment of the village population. If it's for the entire village, it should be for the entire village. Like if you're going to try to pad up the sewer system to encompass the entire village at some point in the future, 94 residents shouldn't be shouldering that entire cost.
so I think that I'm going to let Mr. Jaffer speak first, and then I'll let Libby.
So the study is primarily geared towards Kelvin Grove. We need to know what the Ministry of Environment is going to require in terms of treatment quality. What we'll need to treat our effluent quality to, what standards. Go
What's
ahead.
triggering that study? What's triggering the Ministry of Environment getting involved?
Any upgrade in that treatment plant will require a new permit through Ministry of Environment.
Okay. And why are we talking about an upgrade?
A replacement of the plant.
I think we're normal.
Okay, no, just hear me out, I'm not
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
So the plant broke, all right, happens. Sometimes things break, so we fix it. We haven't added 100 residents, we've added, how many residents to the plant?
94 is what?
It's maxed out at 94.
Yeah.
Okay, so how many have hooked up now?
85.
So we're not at maximum yet. So nothing's changed, the plant's still the same, it's still working, people are still pooping the same way they did before, nothing's changed about that. So
The plant-
I'm curious,
the
I
plant
just.
has 8 years left, 8 to
That's
10
fair,
years left.
okay, it's fair that it's aging and that
Mhm.
components of the plant are aging and need to be repaired, but we don't need to handcuff ourselves and say, now we need a new plant altogether. That's gonna cost $4 million because the Ministry of Environment says so.
And accommodate 500 plus households.
No, it's not. So the plant is aging. We need to look at replacement of that plant, whether it's within the exact same system or with a new system. The minute we look at replacing that plant,
Can we use the word repair?
major repair, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so that, I
Any-
guess I was curious about what that trigger is.
Yeah, any sort of upgrade to that plant will require an updated ministry permit. Our permit now is from 1983. It's quite dated, and the ministry is basically looking for a reason to improve all of the old permits. So the stipulation is any sort of major repair or replacement of an existing facility will trigger the replacement of that permit. The standards, current standards that are being used right now are quite significant. That, whatever that requirement is, will determine the type of treatment process we can use. Whether it's an SBR, an MBR, or filtration treatment plant, that's basically what the study is going to tell us. And what, out of those treatment plant types, what will fit in the Kelvin Grove area. The final portion about adding other components or other portions of the village is simply an add-on to that, will that be possible? Will we be able to use whatever treatment method that's required in a modular form and build on or add on in the future? Our hands are tied with the ministry. The minute we do any sort of major repair or upgrade or replacement of that plant, we have to bring our treatment up to current standards.
So we're not allowed to fix it if it breaks.
If it breaks, we're allowed to fix
So
it.
it broke, let's fix it.
We will, but we have 8 years
Tops.
before the
I'm not saying
entire plant.
we don't need to future-proof the Calvin Grove treatment plant. I'm just saying, let's not overreact. It broke, we'll fix it, and then we look at that.
Correct, and that's what we're doing for this repair,
Okay.
right? But we're on a timeline, and that's what this study is for, is to determine what the next steps are. Let's say we do get a development within the Kelvin Grove neighborhood, and we do get them to replace that treatment plant for $3 million. When those developers come on board, we need to have some sort of plan or some sort of methodology, and that's what this report will provide.
As well, I mean, there even a very small scale subdivision, small scale subdivision opportunities within Upper and Lower Kelvin Grove, to the extent that those exist, and there are a couple. We don't have the capacity to even greenlight those if council wanted to, because we're right there at capacity. So regardless of the fact that the plant broke in the last couple of days, we need to look at this anyways. This was on the radar, and I mean, it had been the intent, previously. My hope was that the developers who were looking at the Kelvin Grove project would fund this study, but that's very iffy at this point, and we need to move ahead with it regardless, for a whole host of reasons. I think it would be somewhat irresponsible not to look at all of the different options at the time we do that study, because a modular plant that can be added to incrementally should the desire arise. I mean, if we're talking about adding a development at the Public Works Yard, that plant cannot be sized for the existing Kelvin Grove 94 properties. It has to be sized for 200 or whatever. There's all kinds of talk about redoing the condo lands. Those stratas have been meeting for the past year with various developers. If anything happens on that, we don't want that to be on septic again. We want that to go into a treatment plant.
Well,
So it needs to be able to accommodate those kinds of forward-looking future plans. And, spending a little bit of extra money in terms of that report and making sure that it's thorough in terms of all of those options at this point in time would be very prudent in terms of providing us with with that knowledge and what those options would look like and what that would require, so that if somebody comes along and council wants to talk about approving any development, you've got the information at hand, and you can say to the developer, this is what we need, or you're going to have to contribute to the cost of this upgrade. There's various different scenarios that can come into play.
I support that 100%. Thorough study, I support that 100%. I just don't want to lose sight of infrastructure that we have and the value that it carries, and some outside force telling us, oh, your plant's no longer in compliance. Let's be careful about agreeing to that, and just use the right language around Kelvin Grove. That's all I'm suggesting.
Thank you.
That plant could work for another 20 years, if it's possibly.
Councillor Barnmire, let's just, I'll do the motherhood part at the back, because I want to draw us back to where we need to make our call. But to the Public Works Manager, and this is, I'm kind of just listening to what Councillor Barnmire says. So we repair the plant in its current format, and from the mythical supply of parts you've got in your Disneyland warehouse, and it's fixed. And so my question is, if we can fix it, why does it only last 8 years?
So there's 4 rotors in this plant. The first 2 rotors were replaced in 2002. The second two were replaced in 2010. The 2002 rotors have failed. So you probably got a life expectancy of about 15 years to 17 years on a rotor. So if we replace these rotors and you add 15 years to the 2010 rotors, that's pretty much where I'm coming up with the eight years for the life expectancy,
And these rotors are
or less.
unavailable, don't exist?
The system has been, the rotors are gonna be manufactured to the original design specs. The system is dated, it's quite obsolete. The company that we originally purchased from has gone bankrupt. The company, or not bankrupt, sorry, is no longer in operation. The company that installed it is no longer in operation. Company that designed it is no longer in operation.
Unlike some of my colleagues on this side of the table, I'm not the biggest engineering kind of guy, but what I'm hearing is that the time compression to the end is that we can't replace what we have there.
You,
If
Because
I may,
I mean, it either is gonna die or it's not.
yeah,
So-
I mean, ideally, you could replace everything in there. It would cost a pretty penny. We don't know the condition of the concrete. So H2S actually affects the structure of concrete. So over time, that chamber is starting to spall and break
Right.
apart.
I'm happy, so to my counselor colleagues then, I think the first thing before we go on is we have to accept that we're not gonna be able to fix this for much longer, and that we need to come up with the plan, and we need to get going on it. And I, Norma, or Counselor Bromeier, I appreciate what you were trying to do, we just keep replacing it, but unless you feel this hasn't been answered, it's not gonna get replaced.
I said repaired.
Yeah, we're gonna repair it right now, but eventually, I figure 8 years max, it'll need replacement.
so from a planning perspective and ensuring that we have a new plant and we're not trying to replace something at the point of absolute
Yeah.
failure, we have to be looking at like 5 years.
5.
So,
I'm looking for nods here that 5 is a magic number, not just the number of fingers on my hand.
Sure.
Okay. Counselor Bain?
In support of what Public Works Manager was saying, this topic came up a couple of years ago in the Infrastructure Committee, and the consensus of the committee at that time, and I don't see any reason why it would have changed, is that it will need replacing in the short term, or shorter term than we'd like. But they were advocating a modularized system like Public Works Manager was talking about, and there are some that you could keep increasing by adding on extra modules, so you could take control of the added capacity with need. So the issue about the whole village becomes somewhat less important at this stage, because if you get the right design and the right modularization, if we go to increase into the rest of the village, you just cover your cost by sticking another module on, to be quite blunt. So I don't think it's such a big motherhood issue necessarily, but you just size it according to the need and the ability to pay at the time. So it just seems like we do need a study to find out just how we would get there, and I don't see really any way around this.
On that second, okay, first CAO and then Counselor Abbott.
I think I pointed out in the report, let's see exactly where, but it was noted in the infrastructure master plan that 2019 was the year that we should be doing this study, and that 2025, I think, was the year of expected timeline for replacement, somewhere in there.
Someone was smart who had a crystal ball, it's right on time. I don't disagree with anything everyone's saying about it, and something that's modular, it's scalable, it's always, but let's keep in mind there's a very limited footprint down there. It's hard to imagine you could put something in that's going to take 6 times the number of people and put it in that location. It seems a little unlikely. So, it could well end up being somewhere else, right? And if it's back to council, trying to do the council part, kind of said suggestion earlier, if it is something different and somewhere else, and then it's unlikely that unfair that it should come out of the reserve fund from the sewer fund that was created by 90 residents. But I guess the first pass at what Kelvin Grove needs, with an open mind to being accommodating on others without going too far down the design of what it looks like for 600 people, I guess is probably the reasonable course of action.
If I may go here on what and I'll go to the CIO to correct me after I'm done on the two main pieces. One is 1A is full study. Well, first, unless you believe there shouldn't be a study, raise your hand. So let's presume that yes for the study. So the question is, do we do the full-blown study, or do we do a narrow scope study? So that's question number one. Number one, on this one, in my view, the narrow study is just a Kelvin Grove immediate concentric. They got a big need. That's probably what it is. But the counter to that for the full study is we've got the public works yard. We've got the potential for the upper, if that ever came to pass. We've got a resident just in Kelvin Grove with a large property that's also there, and we also have the condos across the street. So there may be a reason to do that. So the question here is, do we do the full study or the narrow study, which gets us then into the cost piece? Either Kelvin Grove takes the whole hit on this one from the sewer fund, in that they're also going to take a hit for the pieces, or do we, and I'm not going to say that this is generous as the rest of the village through our operating budget, do 50%. So let's just put real numbers on this. If the suggested number for the master plan is $70,000, and not if that's close enough, maybe less, give or take. So we're talking 35 grand for the full deal if we split it, or 70 for the Kelvin Grove. So I think I'd like to go around in our discussion and just see if there's some consensus on full or partial study, and full payment to, you're getting it next, full to Kelvin Grove, or a split. And we'll go CAO de Jong and then Councillor Bromere.
Actually, I just want to direct a question to Mr. Jaffer. If a study was commissioned that did not request design considerations for a modular plant that could be added to incrementally over time, 30 years or whatever, assuming that the full study, including those things, would be $70,000, what would you estimate a study? And it's not necessarily going to be half. It's probably going to be maybe perhaps a minor variation of that.
My gut is saying 3/4 would be for Kelvin Grove. I envision the study to incorporate the two lots at the end of Kelvin Grove, based on the designs that were submitted. So roughly an additional 30 units there, 10 to 15 units at the Chan's property, plus another 15 to 20 units at the public works yard maximum. I'm just pulling numbers out of the air here, but that's what the initial design of the plant would be. And the last component of this study is whatever design, we'd like it to be modular. What's that look like? Or is that possible even for that space?
So just a comment, or comment basically. If we're going to take into account, regardless, potential development at the public works yard, if you look right across the highway, right above it, we're talking about all of Ocean View. There's over 100 properties. There's no creek to cross. It's everything south of Harvey. Rundle's pretty small. If you tied all of Ocean View into wherever you're coming down underneath the highway, whatever, to the public works yard and then out to the plant, there's boom, there's another 100 properties right away that's helping to pay for that infrastructure, and it's pretty much mostly gravity fed.
Correct.
Although, when I did quiz the works manager and I used my property as an example, he said it would probably cost me personally another $20,000 to hook up because I'm below the street level and it needs a pump and all the work to get through. And given my 200-foot concrete driveway, and I'm presuming I'm going to not use digging it up, it could be very expensive for individuals to join this.
So I did note that in the infrastructure master plan, that rather than design something or assume that the design would incorporate gravity fed from every property, there was I saw that the recommendation would be to pump up to the street. Do you know why that was?
Some residents will have to pump up to the street because they don't have gravity to the street. So if you're on the low side, for example, 240, 250, 230 Ocean View, they're on the low side. The sewer main will be in the street. They can't gravity feed to that sewer. They would have to pump up to Ocean View, and then it would flow by gravity.
Unless there are opportunities possibly for easements
Correct.
that may be negotiated.
Correct.
To go down to the next street.
Okay.
Yeah.
CAO, are you good? Because Councillor
Just-
Bromere is up next. And again, I'd like to focus us on the full study, narrow story, payment,
Yeah.
all or
So
half.
just one last comment before, so I don't forget, but in terms of those property owners who are thinking, well, I just replaced my septic system, I'm good for 30 or 40 years. If you note the options in here, the discussion at option 6, for example, we're talking about something that might be financed over 30 years, so you know, it may be 30 years before you're hooked up, but you know, the idea would be incrementally working toward that objective.
That's an excellent recommendation. Thank you for putting that in there. You sold me. Councillor Bromere, did you get a chance?
Yeah, I know, I feel like you're sort of shoehorning us into two options, and I don't know that that's necessarily
Okay.
the scenario.
Go ahead.
I think that Calvin Grove's study is a study in and of itself regardless, because the plant is nearing the end of its life, and whether we replace it with like for like, new technology has to be implemented there. And chances are the footprints are getting more compact with improved technology, so you could probably get more capacity on that footprint. I think that's a study in and of itself. And I think the village-wide study is a separate study. And Calvin Grove wouldn't fall into that because they already have their infrastructure, they essentially have their own treatment facility. And decentralized treatment is something that is applied to certain communities, so it's an option for Lions Bay where we look at Calvin Grove being its own decentralized plant and its own network of pipes, and then the rest of the village has its own plant somewhere where it makes sense. So I believe there are two studies here regardless. And the Calvin Grove study is funded through the Calvin Grove Reserve, and the balance of the village study would be funded some other way. So I realize it doesn't fit perfectly into your framework of two and this
All
and that.
right, you may be coming back, but Councillor Abbott's up first, and then CAO, do you know?
Okay, so I was trying to get this in a little earlier, but Norm kind of started to go there as well. You asked, everyone agrees we need a study. Is there another option? If you're looking at Calvin Grove and you're looking at replacing that plant, you could go out with a performance specification, which is going to be dictated to you by the ministry anyway, and go out to design build options, and you don't have to get a study if you're just looking at that. You could do the same thing and say, by the way, we want to have an extra 20 or 30 added onto it, and you can go out and bid it that way without spending $7,000 on a study. I think that's an option that should also be on the table. Bigger study, obviously, you couldn't do that because that's going to be a study because there is no guaranteed commercial entity at the end of it. But this way, people know we have to replace it, so you would be able to get decent design bid kind of options.
Yeah, I'm just not sure on how I would rate that design build, because,
Well, you wouldn't have to write. We could get an engineer for him to write the performance specification.
yeah, there's gonna be discussions with ministry on what kind of treatment level.
We can still get a performance specification written, but without doing a study or any sort of conceptual designs, let the contractors We do this, come up with the best solution.
So who pays to write that performance spec?
We'd have to hire an engineer.
Yeah,
Okay.
but instead of doing a $70,000 study, maybe it's a $10,000 performance.
We're saying 70,000, we don't know that it's 70,000.
No, we don't. No, that was an estimate provided by AECom based upon a discussion we had about creating a modular treatment plant in the footprint that we have in Kelvin Grove.
Do RFP.
Through an RFP, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it'd be an RFP process, and it may be that it comes in at less than that. However,
The grant.
the whole notion of having a second plant is a whole different operational ball of wax. It's already a challenge for our Public Works Department in the capacity that they have and all the different things that they're tasked with to operate one treatment plant. If you're talking about the idea of building a separate treatment plant for everything other than Kelvin Grove, that just doesn't make sense because you're going to have to hire on an ongoing basis a whole bunch of staff to run that second treatment plant. That was something that was mentioned in the infrastructure master plan and something that has been discussed, I think, at infrastructure committee, if I remember correctly. It would not be logical to do that. So it would actually be cheaper and better from an operational and cost perspective in the long term to have pump stations pumping all the way from wherever you go, Brunswick or all the way along. And that's essentially the model that was used by AECom when they provided their global estimate that was around 15 million. But if you were to simply go out for some sort of a design build RFP, it would have to be based on, you know, the criteria that whether it's just these 94 lots in Kelvin Grove or whether you add 20 or something like that, you might not even be getting, you know, somebody could easily come back with, okay, here's the best design and this will service your needs and it's this price and it's better than that price, but it doesn't accommodate any expansion whatsoever. It's not modular, can't add to it, you have no options, and then you're stuck with a second plant.
Through the design build process, you get very much fit for purpose. No argument about it. You don't get
So
belts.
you'd have to-
You don't get belts and braces. You get fit for purpose. Chances are, you know, if I was one of the 90 people, you know, and it's my money, and I wanted to be, you know, single-minded and selfish. I'm not saying these 90 people are. That's what I'm on the hook for. That's what I would like to see done potentially.
So if you do that, I think I ran some numbers here, you know, if you had a lower cost plant and you're gonna just for Kelvin Grove, and those people are the only ones who are funding it, over 5 years, you're gonna be paying $4,000 a year, plus your utility bill. That's a pretty big chunk of change, as opposed to seeing whether, if there are opportunities to have a modular plant with incremental capacity where you can bring other people on stream to help pay for that, they're going to pay a lot less. So it's in the interests of those taxpayers to have a wider study and to incorporate the possibility of bringing on not only other residents that currently exist, but also potential developments. And we can't foresee what those are in total, what they are, or what capacities they'll require. But I think that it would be short-sighted not to do a study that incorporates all of that potential for the sake of Kelvin Grovers.
All right, we'll stop here on this one. I'm going to use my executive prerogative to say I think
Sorry,
we...
just add
Oh,
one thing, I
yes.
apologize.
Sorry, I held you in
In terms
advance.
of, the funding, like we're talking about the study, but the reality is this plant has to be paid for and the money raised in a short period of time. So we would be looking at grants as well. And I have been trying to find grants, and the number one thing required for all grants is a feasibility study. So that would be another reason to do the study. And I want to stress, that was just a quote we got. We would go out to an RFP process. We're looking at a grant that would hopefully fund 50% of the study. But we will need that study to get the grant. I mean, I know it's frustrating because we don't know if we'll get the grant, but more and more it's becoming a requirement to have very, robust studies before they'll give us the grant. Also showing that we will be more environmentally sound because they wouldn't even consider a grant for like grants no longer exist for
Thank you, CFO Rook. And just to do the counter on that, not to presuppose that that the rest of the village would potentially be in favor of using our grant capacity, our cash, or our borrowing ability to do the Kelvin Grove, whatever happens here. So that's way down there. So back to this, and I think it's been eloquently presented by everybody at the table, especially those most technically versed. I'm drawing you back to, again, it's the full study or a narrow study on the engineering thing, which I think apparently doing two things at once is confusing. So we'll just go with that one first. So I think we've all heard the reasons back and forth, so I'm not going to go through this all over again. So I'm going to look for, as I rotate around, say, would you be in favor of, and you don't have to say why. So, Councillor Bain, full study or a narrow scope?
I came into here with an open mind, and I feel like my mind has been drained by listening to the conversation. I was more sure about it before I came.
Look at the outfall, page 44.
Yes. That's a tough one. I can't disagree with anything anybody around the table has said. You know, the idea of a design build really struck home with me, and I think makes a lot of sense. CFO's comments about we need a study if we're going to get any grant funding makes a lot of sense. Sorry, you didn't ask for reasons, but I'm trying to work my way into giving you an answer.
Good, because you got 10 more seconds.
Thank you.
Would you like me to come back to you?
I'll probably be just more befuddled after I hear everybody speak again, but at the moment I'm more leaning to the option of doing the study and
Full study.
full study.
The one most affected, Councillor
Well,
Kim.
I agree, if you're gonna do a study, you might as well do the whole thing.
Okay. Councillor Abbott. I'm happy to come back to you.
A narrower study,
Narrow?
narrower.
Narrow scope, defined scope, I guess it's called that.
Take care of the immediate issues.
Narrow, immediate needs.
With a mind to some possibility of expansion, but take care of the immediate needs, is what I think it should.
Not to dwell on this, but given what I thought I heard Public Manager Jaffer say was that of the full study, 75% of it would be Kelvin Grove concentric. And I'm not sure if I'm fabricating this, that would also contemplate the other properties, the Chan property, the Public Works. So, which are like a stone's throw away from this. So that's too far away for you?
I have to challenge the 75%. You're talking about lift stations from other parts of the village, and there's piping.
that's
infrastructure.
not
This
all
whole
part of
study, the study that you're trying to do.
That's not part of the study. The
Okay.
study that we're looking at right now
It is suggested.
is that's what AECom did in their infrastructure. What we're looking at right now is what are the requirements that the ministry is gonna want us to treat to?
Agreed.
What treatment systems will meet those ministry requirements?
For 90 people.
For 90 people, and what treatment systems will fit within the Kelvin Grove area for those 90 people. The last point would be, can this be increased if we want it to be?
Okay, that's
Can it be-
that's the narrow study that I have in mind, not
Yeah.
the wider study. So maybe we're on the same page. We just
I think
define
you're on
it.
the same page
And it's
here.
got an incremental component at the end.
Right.
So that's the last aspect of the study is what are the options in order to take these needs and satisfaction of these requirements and ensure that there's flexibility to expand in the future? What does that look like? And what does
On
that do to the
existing
options?
site.
We're not exploring now the other 530
No.
people
No,
and the
no.
financial model you described of 30 years and all
No.
that. Okay,
No.
we're on the same page then. We'll stop talking about it.
Councillor Bromere.
I'm confused now.
Well, I think if I can.
I am, I'm totally
I-
confused.
if
I
I
thought we
under-
were talking about a Calvin Grove focus study versus a village-wide study.
Mhm.
Those are two very different things.
We are doing, I believe it's called a village-wide study. However, 75% of the work for this village-wide study effectively covers the existing Kelvin Grove situation.
We are not.
No, we're not talking about
study.
We're not,
It's not
a study.
we're not looking into pump stations and
Then it's
sewer
not a-
mains.
Then it's not a
and-
village-wide study, that we can't call
So
it
what
that.
we're looking at is, can that site accommodate a treatment plant to the newest standards and be modular to, in the future, potentially
Increase
incorporate
capacity.
the village?
So
So
simply-
right
Just
now,
looking at a
it's
flow calculation.
flow calculation, treatment size, treatment capacity, yeah.
It's just a number that they would be working with in terms, engineers have those numbers, I think, for what the flow capacities are for 200 versus
Mhm.
300 versus 600.
So you're
So they
essentially
would
saying
simply-
is the real estate that currently houses the Calvin Grove treatment plant big enough to house a treatment plant that can accommodate the entire village?
If
Is
it's
that what-
Eventually.
added to
Okay, so
incremental.
that's not a village-wide study, that's strictly
Okay.
focusing on that lot.
That's what I.
Yeah, but I mean, we need to clarify that, because I think it wasn't super clear.
Okay, good.
Right?
Now that you know, you are in favor of the whole study, or the Kelvin Grove study.
Well, I was initially in favor of a village-wide study versus Calvin Grove, and that's what I was getting at. I think Calvin Grove on its own, what you're talking about now is can that piece of land accommodate a plant big enough for the whole village?
Yeah, in the
Okay.
future, yes.
Incrementally.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, sure, I think that's a great idea. I still don't think we
Just hold it.
totally clear on what we just agreed to,
All right,
but whatever.
then my recommendation is that Councillor Cunliffe, that you should put forward that, as a motion, that we would do a full study along the lines recommended.
A motion to do a full study along the lines recommended.
There you go. Seconder, please. I will second that. Any discussion?
I think that motion needs to be more specific. I'm
Alright.
sorry, the language around that motion needs to be more clear.
Uh,
That has nothing to do
All right,
with,
we'll-
I think we're just
I-
being befuddled. here.
I think
don't like
we're,
it.
all right, I'm going to give the CAO, I think you know where we're going with this. I'm looking at the cut and do number one here.
So, how about a motion that, that staff proceed with an RFP for an engineering study for replacement of the wastewater treatment plant with the objectives of meeting ministry requirements and regulations and addressing the potential for an expandable, an incrementally expandable model in the options for such plan.
You so put forward?
I so.
Okay, what's the
Seconder.
ultimate build-out? I mean, incrementally to what capacity? To the full village?
Yeah, up to the full village.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
That's, I'm into that.
Thank you for seconding. I'm careful. Any discussion? Calling the motion. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And, okay, so that's part A. Well, that's the first resolution. Second one is who's paying for this? And, well, but we're here because, I mean, I don't want to do this again in 3 months or 2 months when we get, a month when we get the study RFP stuff. So the issue here, as I see it, and I'm not stuck on 50% or 100%, the recommendation was 100%, and it comes from the sewer fund, it comes from potential with grants, and we hope success in any case. It's not a taxation thing at this point. Or we split the cost because there is some benefit to the rest of the village with the study. I'll leave it at that, and I think we can, this is a pretty easy discussion here because we've really done this already. Councillor Abbott, you're first up.
I'd like to propose that we make the expandability option an option, separate line item on the RFP, and that proportion of ours is what the rest of the village pays. And Kelvin Grove are only paying for the base design, which might be 75%.
Notwithstanding that an expanded plant with more users contributing to the costs will reduce the costs for Kelvin Grovers.
Huge advantage to Kelvin Grove, the development.
Why don't you run that again, Peter?
So,
Well, Neville's, sorry.
so
Councillor
separating,
Abbott's
I just
brow
don't
is
see the
furrowed.
point of separating out some portion of this RFP's cost, because the expandability portion of the study
Could be to
is
the benefit.
to the benefit
Could
of
be.
Kelvin Grove.
Could be to the
Yes.
If it ever happened, could be to the benefit.
Yeah, I mean, if I was someone from Kelvin Grove, I would be wanting as many users on this system as possible, because that's gonna make it cheaper for me.
That's true.
If it ever happened.
There's also a 50% potential for a 50% grant. And we don't know that 70,000 is an accurate number. Once we go out to RFP, competitive bidding, I'm actually quite hoping it's gonna be quite low. Quite a
Well,
bit lower.
and you can hope that it is. So there's also, and just to quickly go around, just to, in our thinking here, for CFO Rook, for the grant, which I think if I read, it's potentially available, but not for sure. Did I dream that, or is it in here?
It's available, it's just FCM grants are challenging to get there. And the IPG grant, I'm not sure, the deadline was last week.
Yeah.
So the next one isn't for 6 months, and
Okay.
you can't spend money before you get the grant. So we'll definitely,
It's like the White House. Who did
Just
it?
can't read my writing.
All right. Did you
What did
close
you
the
say?
fridge door?
I'm just asking, where would the village money come from if it was not, if it wasn't coming from this reserve?
So,
oh, I see, it would have to come from taxation, like we'd have
It's
to
operating budget,
tax
so,
it.
yeah.
Well, the operating budget, but we'd have to
Yeah.
communicate it, and that's my concern, is
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, I do genuinely believe that this study could legitimately be paid for Kelvin Grove, because I think the development piece is, we're talking about the study, but there's a plant that has to be paid for within the next 10 years that could cost as much as $3 million. So I want to see, in many ways as possible, as we can get funds towards that other than come from the taxpayer. We would then have to say a portion of the study would be part of taxation. There'd be a whole communication piece around that to the village. Why is the village paying for a sewer study when they don't have sewer? And then I'd also be concerned about implying that it's coming in the near future. I mean, we still get people when they come to pay their bills saying, when are we getting sewer?
Right.
But then it would have to come from taxation. There's no reserves to draw from.
Councillor Barnier.
Here-
You're talking a lot tonight.
I know. I just like things to be clear. As far as paying for it goes, I mean, that to me is a difficult one. It's a plant that has to be replaced in the near future. So I think the burden lies with Calvin
Sewer
Grove,
fund.
unfortunately, with the whatever reserves are built up there. You know, Councilor Abbott brings up a good point. You know, I guess we could break out the piece. I think that's going to be difficult to do. How much work is attached to studying whether the plant is 60% or 80%? You know, that I find that very difficult and tedious. So I don't know. I generally think Calvin Grove should foot the bill for this study.
The works, the whole deal. Is that your view?
Whether they size the plant for sizing the plant bigger and determining whether it can fit on that footprint, I think is going to be a tiny, tiny fraction of this study.
Okay. Councillor Abbott, any?
it sounds like that's the only practical way out to go, because there's no other way to do it.
Okay. Councillor Bain?
Well, it seems to me the concept of modularization is already out there, and anybody building a new sewage treatment plant should be considering that anyhow. So I don't really think if you can modularize the thing, there's really much to study. Either it is or it isn't modularized, and if it is, then you can keep adding on, hopefully in the same footprint until the rest of Lions Bay could do it. So I think if there is a sharing aspect of this to be pursued, it would be difficult to quantify or even say where the split should be. I don't think it's a 50-50, because I think that there's no benefit for the rest of Lions Bay for some of us till the rest of our life, I suppose. But I mean, it very well could be sooner than later, but I don't know. So anyhow, back to my original point, I think the modularization concept isn't going to take much of a study at all. So I would think the Lions Bay, the rest of Lions Bay's portion should be a smaller part if we are going to split the fund.
And I'm going to just pose this, and I'm going to be turning to CAO Dion to respond to this. So let's say, just hypothetically, that we so legislate that the sewer fund pays for the 100% of this. And so they pay for it all, they do the study, and along comes a developer and says, I'd like to develop these properties and I'd like to contribute towards the plan, the plant, the whole 9 yards. That is substantially, I guess it's the village's asset, but it's the residents that paid for it. So I'm kind of thinking this in terms of risk reward here.
Well, I mean, I don't really know what the question is, because we're just talking about study. And if a developer comes along and says, I'll contribute to the cost of this so that it's sized appropriately from the get-go to accommodate my development, then they're going to contribute to the cost of it, whatever that cost may be, and that will be to the benefit of Kelvin Grove residents. So that's,
So
we're
that
talking about the
can
construction aspect of it,
contribute
not
to them and
the
the
study.
operate- Okay.
We never, do you not want to weigh in here?
No, I'm saving Councillor Cunliffe for last. And that, sorry. She hasn't had a chance to do that. Okay, so, and I've done this on purpose, actually, Councillor Cunliffe, so you could hear everybody. You are in the neighborhood, and so you reflect the neighborhood. And your thoughts are what?
Well, if we're bound by the government and permitting to have this done, then we have no choice. So I struggle on a larger spectrum, just why this is a segmented, it's village infrastructure. It just happens to be newer. So I don't understand why there is a fee for sewer for Kelvin Grove. And I've never heard of another community where you pay by what is available in your neighborhood, and I don't know, you work in West Van. Is there an example in West Vancouver where the residents of Dunderave are paying a special tax that the residents of the Upper British properties aren't paying?
Yeah,
So I'm just curious about that. I've
I
always
just- if-
wondered.
If I could send my repair and service bills for my septic system to the village, I'm on board. Then I think we should all pay the same. The amount of money that I have to pay every month to power that system and for repairs and to have it pumped out, that's all on me. I gotta pay for that myself.
Yeah,
And it adds up.
And you're
I
not,
just-
and you're not counting on the village to write that check?
That's what I'm getting, that was my point.
Okay.
In saying that is if I could expense that to the village, I'd be great.
it's just that it's a municipality, it adds, you know.
Mhm.
We also have buried power lines, and like as standards change, so it's confusing to me.
Well, to buried power lines, Hydro pays for all of that, so
Yes,
there's never
yeah,
really.
but I mean,
to
that
answer
was
your
the standard
question,
of the
all
day.
municipalities who have sewer that isn't universal, just the users of the sewer pay for it.
Okay, thank
And
you
that
for
is
clarifying.
kind of good timing. I happened to just read something on this GFOA forum. Someone was looking to combine the sewer and water bills to see if there was one utility fee, and the response was unanimous. There's not one utility fee really anywhere in British Columbia because you pay for the service you get. So
Okay.
that's why. So in terms of the fairness, that's the answer to the question, is that quite a few municipalities, I was surprised, do have sewer that isn't across their whole village, especially
Yeah.
smaller municipalities, and only the users of the sewer pay for it.
Okay, thank
so
you for
West
clarifying.
Van, the majority of West Van pays for sewer through Metro. They have a set rate. Everybody to the north of Horseshoe Bay gets treated through Citrus Wine, which is a municipally owned sewer system, not GBRD. They pay a different rate just for their
Okay.
sewer, yeah. So it does add.
Okay,
Okay, I think here's the
thank
way
you for
it,
clarifying that.
Yeah.
thank you. I'm going to call the end of the discussion unless the hand shoots up. Okay, so really then, as I'm observing this, that the preference is that Kelvin Grove pays 100% of the study through their, well, the sewer, let's depersonalize it. The sewer reserve pays for this when the time comes, less staff's best efforts on grants. I'm going to put a motion forward to staff to execute that. Have a seconder? Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Okay. I don't think there's anything more in these options, is there, Peter?
No, I think that's good for now.
Good, thank you. CFO Rook, page 53 of 104.
So I have, we have the water, sewer, and solid waste budget under resolutions for first, second, and third reading, but I included in the package the budgets that we looked at the last meeting. But I do have an on-table report, because we have discussed a lot of numbers, to show you what the budget, the
Thank
sewer
you.
budget, it's just the sewer one I changed. With the study in here, I put in 75,000 for this one, for the study, just to be conservative. Did you want one?
Oh, thank you.
And then I have some, for the audience. So just going through them in order, the water budget is unchanged from the last meeting. We're showing a 5% increase in user rates. And then the solid waste budget is unchanged. We're showing a 1.5% increase in the user rates for single family. That essentially, for single family equates to a $5 increase. And then for the sewer, which, I didn't keep one for myself, but do you have the next one? Thanks. So what I changed with the sewer was, for this one, I kept the rate at a 5% increase, and then I just put in the study. And then as you can see, there's no increase in the utility rate, but it just flows through. We've been accumulating a sewer surplus over the years, so there would just be a draw from the sewer surplus. But then, because of these extra costs that we're going to be incurring, plus we know there's some additional repairs coming, on the last page, I showed some scenarios of the impact of a slightly higher increase in the sewer fees. So right now, there's essentially a $40 increase in the annual fees for a 5% increase, and I showed you different scenarios with an 8%, a 10%, a 12%, or a 14% increase. And that's council's decision. I just wanted to show you that option because there had been some changes to the sewer budget. So a 10% increase would be an $80 increase annually in the fees. And everything else basically stayed the same. The secondary suite fees would go up if the fees went up because it's 40% of the fee. But that was essentially the only change.
CFO Rook, what will be required when we need to pay for the pending
Right.
repairs?
Right.
Will that require a budget amendment?
Yes, I think because it's a bit of an unknown what those repairs will be. We know they're going to be substantial. Again, we would draw from reserves. There would be no impact on the rate decision. So I would bring forward a budget amendment at that time, depending on when we had the figures. Because the actual budget, we're really just doing a resolution now for the rates. So the rest of the sewer budget essentially comes when we do the bylaw in a couple of months. So if we know the amounts by then, we would put them in, but it would just be an expense line of what the cost would be, and then just a larger draw from reserves. So if the budget bylaw had been adopted before we have those costs, then it would be what we call a budget amendment. I would just come forward to council and we would have to change the bylaw to show, even though it would be a net zero impact on the utility rates, because of the dollar value, I'm required to show the increase in the expense and how we're funding it, which would be a draw from reserves.
But the taxation in respect of sewer, so let's say, for example, the repairs came in and there was insufficient funds in the reserve to pay for those repairs, what would happen?
Then we have an issue. I'm not sure how we would pay for it. So we have to, hopefully we'll know in the next little while what the repairs are going to be after this study, which we're very hopeful that this study will not be $75,000. So we still have probably at least $150,000, if not more, in the reserve fund, and I'm hoping that would be enough to cover the repairs. Because if it isn't, then we do have to tax. So
Wouldn't they just borrow from us temporarily till we caught up with the next budget cycle?
Well, I have to show it within the sewer fund, so I'd
Yeah.
have to show that financing, so I'd have to show the borrowing, so there would have
Yeah.
to be a budget amendment.
You
and,
just
uh,
mentioned the study. Why did you mention the study in relation to the repair?
Oh, I'm just saying that right now I've been very conservative, and I put 75,000 through, so I'm showing that we have about 140,000 left in the reserve. So I'm hopeful that that study will be cheaper, we'll get a grant, so we'll have more money in the reserve. Because the problem is, if the repairs cost more than we have in the reserve, then I have to find a way to fund it. And normally, the only way to fund it is to increase utility fees, but utility fees will already be set, and I can't go back and say, oh, we have this additional charge. So I mean, extreme measures, worst case scenario, they were really, really expensive repairs, then it would have to be, it could be a parcel tax, it could be a variety of things.
And
So
you
we
can do
just
that
have to be.
interim?
Yeah,
I didn't know
it
that.
could be for
Anytime.
2 years,
Yeah.
3 years,
Yeah.
could be
Okay.
whatever.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm hopeful, there probably after this year will be about $210,000 in the sewer reserve. If the study is, we're really hopeful will be less than 75, that still will leave us $150,000 to $175,000 to cover the repairs. Right now, we're expecting them to be at least $100,000.
I guess I raised the point just
Yeah.
so that when
No,
you're
it's
looking
very
at
valid.
potential, are you comfortable with the 5% increase on sewer budget for
Yeah.
utilities? Or, these are the other things that are kind of staff are thinking
Yes.
about in terms of, maybe we should up it a bit to try and pad that a little bit. I don't know, I'm just putting it out there.
My CAO, I will ask you, is there, usually the CFO is quite forward on this, is there you put the data out here, do you have a recommendation?
I think you should increase it, but in terms of, we can't increase it enough to cover a
No, you're
$75,000
ensuring there's
shortfall in the
situation.
repairs. But I think it's also an important message to send too, that things aren't okay with the sewer right now, and there are future bills coming. There'll be a plant that has to be funded, hopefully offset with grants or possibly developers. But I don't want to send a message by just having a 5%, not to dismiss that, but it is just a $40 increase for the year, that everything's okay in sewer land, that there is potentially big costs coming down the pike. So I think it would be prudent to have a higher increase.
So just playing devil's advocate a little bit. So if we went from 5% to 10%, you're going to need extra $3,500.
Yeah, it's a minimal.
The only
amount.
reason we're having this discussion was something happened last week. If it had happened in 6 months' time, we wouldn't really be having the discussion. Is the $3,500 really that material? Do we really need to go back and say, oh, we changed our mind, we want an extra 5% on the sewer? Because it isn't going to be a material difference to the repairs. If we're looking at 125,000, there's 128 or 122, it doesn't make any
No.
difference. So why don't we I would suggest we leave it the way we decided last week. With all the best intentions, we never had a crystal ball, we didn't know what's going to happen this week.
Yeah. The only thing I was saying, with the 5%, I had actually was going to push council to increase that before any of this happened, just because of the message and that the plant needs replacing. And I think it's that we've had minimal increases. We haven't had an increase in sewer in 4 years. It's been 0% for the last 4 years. This will be the first time. But you're right, in terms of paying for the repairs, it doesn't do anything to me. It was more just the message that, you're going to start seeing higher increases in sewer and then potentially a parcel tax to pay for this. But you're right, in terms of solving the problem, there's only 85 users, so even a 10% increase just gives us, an additional 4,000.
I tend to agree with Neville here. If we need to communicate this to the residents of Kelvin Grove, then adding an extra 10% to our fees are not, no one's gonna get that message. It needs to be a strong, everybody gets a letter, this is what's happening, this is what you need to be prepared for. And that way no one's taken out of left field and think, well, it only cost me an extra 80 bucks last year. Why are you asking me, for $1,000 for the next 30 years or potentially $4,000 a year for 5 years? Like that would be taken way out of left field, I feel, where this is really sort of like it's a passive sort of communication. And it is serious, so I think it needs to be communicated much more directly.
If I can go on this one, I somewhat planned, but I wasn't expecting that to use Works Manager Jaffer's term, catastrophe, to be used in my village update for this week, but I've already written it. And the Kelvin Grove situation, you could write pages about it, but I'm not going to. But I think we've established that Public Works or the office is going to write something in this, which will follow the mayor's desk piece. I'm going to address it and make reference to the reports that are here and strongly suggest that people read this. And I'm also going to suggest that within the next 2 weeks, we, actually I'll write again in another 2 weeks, and that probably advising that we'll be mailing stuff out. So I think we're going to be telling them in 3 different ways that the future is not very bright at this second, and there's stuff coming down the pike and it's going to be expensive. I don't see an extra couple of points here for 50 or 80 bucks is going to do much when people are looking at a parcel tax potentially of 20,000 bucks. So I'm happy with leaving it as it is, and I open it to any further discussion. There being none, CFO, you want to continue?
No, that's fine. I just wanted it out there for
Okay.
discussion, that was all.
So as a technicality, we are, do the readings later.
It's received for information purposes?
Yes, thank you. Good catch. Has somebody put a motion for a receipt for information purposes? Thank you, thank you. All in favor? Good, done. Thank you, CFO Rick. Okay, and then, isn't, we were going,
Next item is tabled until after
this
the
item
vote.
is tabled. So, if everybody will recall. And we move on to
And the additions, BDO presentation from
da-da-da-da-da.
CFO Rook.
Isn't it the, oh, the,
Yeah.
sorry, yeah, isn't it? Yes, it was more just a reminder to council, when I did my finance work plan, one of the dates was May 7th for presentation of the financial statements by BDO. So Bill Cox, our partner at BDO, presents the financial statements to council, and historically we've done that at a CSC in the afternoon, starting at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. It's dedicated just to the financial statements. They're presented, council has an opportunity to ask questions. And then from that CSC, the members of the CIC, which happen to be council, make a recommendation to the evening's council meeting to approve the financial statements because they have to be formally approved before we can sign them. So it was partly a reminder that was coming May 7th, and kind of a save the date and see if you were still comfortable with having that as a CSC to start. The alternative would be the presentation could happen at the council meeting.
Subject to
Historically.
availability of Mr. Cox?
Yes, I
presume?
mean, we have previously given him that date, but
Mhm.
now we have to fine tune it and say, he usually does like up to 3 meetings in a day, so we have to lock into our time, either late afternoon or at the council meeting.
The other aspect of doing it in the evening at the council meeting is that, generally speaking, he does his presentation, then the meeting is closed, so that he can speak directly to council, give council an opportunity to ask any questions that pertain to personnel, and then the meeting is reopened, and then the rest of the meeting continues, which, if there's people in the audience, is awkward because then they have to step out and then come back in. So that's another reason why it would be better to have it in the afternoon as a CSC, subject to council's availability.
In my many years of this, it's always been an afternoon session. His partner's a very busy person, and he's running around doing a lot of stuff, but it'd be pretty tough to get him here in the evening and then to shoehorn him in, as you say, CAO. Okay?
So could we, I provided with an answer, or?
Well, I
does
mean,
it have to confirm
he's
it with,
not going to come in the evening.
No, he can come in the evening.
He can?
I just wanted to,
Did he say he could?
We don't know
Well,
for sure.
we don't know for sure, but we have, to me it was, sorry, I don't know, am I just letting everyone know then it is in the afternoon and save the date? Or-
I've known Mr. Cox for decades and decades, so I always have a fine time with them, whether it's afternoon or evening. But I think perhaps for our new counselors, it's good to meet the new auditor. I would suggest the evening,
Okay.
unless my colleagues, I don't know, you've got your call.
Evening's always easier for me to say yes to, 'cause I can do that without
Say
having to
yes.
consult
Yes.
others and-
Definitely open up options for me.
Councillor Cunliffe, are you a yes? I would say that's a yes.
Okay.
And I think depending on the value that everybody gets of this, it could be in the afternoon in the future. Okay, next up.
Municipal grants. I've received all the municipal grant applications, and in the past, I guess for the past few years, we've asked, I receive applications that have the financial request and the details, and then as part of the budget process, that is sent as a package, as part of the council package to all the councillors, so you can look at them. But anyone requesting a grant over $1,500, in the past, we've had them come and do a presentation. So I just wanted guidance from council as to whether or not you would still want that, or if having just the applications in the package was sufficient. Just to give you a sense of who that would be, anyone with a grant request over $1,500, there's just the Lions Bay Events Committee and the Senior Social Circle were the only ones that had a grant request over $1,500. Lions Bay Arts Council, they actually are now considered self-funding, so they're not technically asking for a grant, but if you recall last year they did a competition to choose the banner, and the banners have been chosen, and then those banners are paid for, and they're paid for through the Arts Council, but technically it is just a village expense. I mean, we would pay for the banners. So it would just be whether or not you wanted to see a presentation from the Lions Bay Events Committee and the Social Circle, or if you would be comfortable just seeing the applications. Sometimes it can be, especially with the events committee, challenging for them to make an evening meeting to do the presentation. But that being said, they are willing to do that. So it would just be council's preference.
I'll open this up, but if they come and present, it's your chance to be interactive. And if you've got any questions on the application, it makes it hard to deal with it right on the spot. So that's my informative piece. Councillor Payne, you have preference?
No, I have no preference. If we want to just accept their application and such, it's fine.
Councillor Cunliffe?
Yeah, I'm not set either way. I'm happy to just see their application, or if they would like to come, then they're more than welcome.
Nobody's particularly asking to come, are they?
Nope.
Okay. Councillor Abbott?
I would like to speak to them. There's opportunity to have back and forth communication.
Thank you. Councillor Premier?
So the assumption is we get to review those first?
Yeah, you'll see the applications as part of the package, and then just, like I say, the tradition is being that...
It should be open to them if they want to make a
Okay.
presentation.
Right.
So it's open. Well, I don't think this is a hard deciding vote, but I'd like to see them.
Okay.
We would like to see them.
So the other ones are substantially smaller
Yeah.
grants that we would just present, or
Process,
provide
yeah.
the materials.
Yep.
Okay.
And last one.
So with respect to UVCM in September, I wanted to point out that generally speaking, if there are any resolutions that are near and dear to the hearts of council that you'd want to see advanced to UVCM to champion, whatever that may be, it needs to go through a process where it goes to the local area association. So for us, that would be the Lower Mainland Local Government Association. And so the deadline for submitting any such resolutions to the LMLGA is March 15th. So I'm just bringing it up now so that you can give some thought to the matter, ask any questions of me in the interim before the next meeting if you like. What that might look like. I can talk to you about what those resolutions look like, what they need to entail. But at this point, I'm just throwing it out there in case anybody has any thoughts or not. I mean, I think last year was the first year that we put forward anything, and that was regarding the average speed over distance, which was endorsed at UBCM. So, yeah, just a heads up, and we can come back and circle back on it at March, well, at the February 19th, I won't be here, but you could talk about it, and then by March 5th, we'll need to know.
So, I'm a bit of a novice when it comes to that side of things, so give me an example of an issue that they could help us with.
So,
That
the
we
average
can't-
speed over distance is a
Average
good
speed
example.
over
That's one,
distance.
great.
Yeah, that's, so, it was a case of basically identifying what the issue is, so whereas there's this issue, and whereas there are opportunities to, deal with this issue through the following solutions or proposed solutions, A, B, C, whatever, we hereby propose or.
So that, we
Now
took that there
therefore-
because we really have no say over what happens with the
So it's a resolution that
So
then,
it goes to
so if
the
there's
floor.
something like that, then it would go to the LMLGA, they'd kick it around. So that's, other municipalities in the Lower Mainland. So they kick around the resolutions that are proposed. They decide, whether they're gonna support or recommend those resolutions. If you don't get their recommendation, then chances are it's not gonna go anywhere at UBCM. You really need to have that. And so, yeah,
Which
that's
means-
sort of the process to feed it up the chain. And that's sort of an example of
Yeah.
the kind of thing that you.
Which means it won't go on the agenda, so that's the end of that, if they don't support
Yeah.
it. So you have to have a compelling case that's going to resonate with other communities, the Union of BC municipalities, all the municipalities, so it's got to be somewhat dear to the heart or a mainstream cause.
I haven't thought of anything offhand myself.
Okay.
This came across my desk, so I thought I'd bring it up. We can talk again.
Right.
But,
Okay, anybody who wants to think about that, they can go offline with that. So I've received your report, thank you very much, CAO Dion, which concludes staff's piece of this, and I go to the mayor, and if I could refer you to page 73, 74. It's hard to believe Thanksgiving was just yesterday, when the events committee president and I traded emails. I held this to myself for a while, till acclamation and elections were over, then it was Christmas, and it didn't seem right, and here we are, it is right. Long story short is the events committee, in the current events committee, would prefer not to do Canada Day in the traditional way. And the traditional way is, boom, the gates open at 10, and it's painty faces, goats, chickens, activities, bouncy castles, I think beer garden, all the rest of that stuff, and then a variety of community events, speeches, student things, Citizen of the Year, and all this kind of stuff, singing the O Canada, and then a free lunch for everybody that's there. So, events committee, if I can be brief about this, have said no, they don't want to do that. They would prefer to begin their watch in the, I've lost where it is, but the substantive part of it is in the early evening, where they go to the, where they want to go, which is the bring your own dinner and the band stuff and the fireworks. So that is a rather marked change of what the village has been used to since inception. And I think other communities make a very big effort on Canada Day. I'm not suggesting we come to an answer on this one at this moment. We can think about it, and I'd hold it off till next meeting unless, I guess doing nothing really doesn't resonate with me, because it is a time when our community does gather. And I'm not trying to suggest that the events committee do any more than what they've said that they might do on this, but perhaps there are other village groups that would be interested in this or part, or maybe just doing the ceremonial part, I don't know. Happy to do a quick round of discussion on this and see where it goes. Norm, Councillor Brenner, any thoughts?
Not particularly.
Just as caveat, this is not a staff-led event. This is volunteer, or I would see the opportunities as internal volunteers, non-staff, staff is a no-go, or an outsourced option, and I don't know what that looks like. Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have any strong thoughts. I do note on the earlier item we just had that the events committee get a grant, right? So I guess it's not completely hands off. We do support them through a grant. So I guess we should feel we have some sort of influence. I guess we can't direct them as to how they go about things. However, clearly they've come to the conclusion that it's not, it's not practical to continue to do it the way it is. So, yeah, need some thought, I guess.
Okay, that's 2 on thought. Councillor Cunliffe.
I say you could put it to other committees to see if they were willing to take on a daytime event, not necessarily with a barbecue and bouncy castle, but just the ceremonial part of it, or perhaps take them up on their offer of including the ceremonial part inclusive of the evening events.
The ceremonial event is ceremonial stuff, the flag, the singing, the bounce. Frequently the MLA is here. Do you see this as a combination of volunteer groups? For example, maybe another large volunteer group, such as the seniors perhaps, might be interested in doing this?
That's why I would suggest taking it to the seniors group, perhaps the Historical Society, and you could even touch base with the Arts Council. They are doing the Arts and Garden Festival this year, so that might be a stretch, but it's worth the ask.
Would you make that ask?
I could reach out to the Arts Council.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we could ask you, before we go to Councillor Bain, if we could ask you to make the calls in the next 2 weeks, and this is nothing that, it's pretty big change, and I see the communication piece, whatever happens, is going to be the bigger part of it than the actual event. So if you could reach out, Councillor Cunliffe, and maybe advise us when we have this discussion next. And Councillor Bain?
Well, I come here with no real solution to the problem. I'm thinking that the awarding of the scholarships and stuff seem like it would drift off the page if we don't maintain something here. And the thing has been so well attended in the years past, it would be a shame to just let it go. I really don't know who we could turn to other than what you just suggested.
Going in a different direction, let's think, who else organizes a large party that's all day at the beach? Who wears blue and has funny red hats?
Somebody else.
Maybe this would be an opportunity for them too. Don't know whether they're interested in that. I don't know that we could combine something that's in their spirit as well as ours. I just don't know. But when you've got 2 groups with large membership, it might be something that might work.
Well, I know that Firefighter Day takes a lot of their energy and effort and stuff like that. Whether they want to do 2 events a year, I don't know. I gotta ask the chief.
Well, just push it around and see where it might go. If that's okay, are you fine with that?
Yep.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Abbott. Sir?
Yeah, so the senior circle and the scholarship awards. So if you want,
I'll ask.
I could do that side and speak to Louis if you like on the scholarship side,
Sure.
because it's going to affect with the Curly Stewart as well. So
How about the 2 of you duke this out offline?
yeah.
Fair enough. Councillor, sorry, you're elevated.
It was my understanding the scholarship presentations were going to happen in the evening. I saw some emails back and forth. You were confirming
It's-
that that would be,
I've
so
read
that
this
would
off.
happen in the evening between the 5 and 8, but they would still do that. And we've actually said in the grant application that it was going to happen between 5 and 8 as well, so that they have committed to it.
Okay, so can you guys take note of this in your thing? Thank you.
But whether it happens between 5 and 8 or between 10 and 11.
No, I was getting the impression you were concerned it had been dropped, that it has been taken
No,
care of, that.
I must, there's rousing hands up. The event is going to change, the time is going to change, and the venue is going to change, but I think the core events, there's a desire to have them still. So I think we're just moving it and maybe shrinking them, and somebody's gonna have to pack their own lunch this year, maybe. Okay. How un-Canadian. All right. Okay, we're done on that one. And Councillor Cunliffe, you're up on 2 pieces here. Celebration updates.
The volunteer week celebration.
Yes. This is Councillor,
I have.
sorry I put it in here for you.
I have not.
On either of these items?
I reached out to Anne.
Yeah,
I've reached out, I've not heard back from her.
okay.
So I will reach out to her again, and I have not made any progress on volunteer week celebration as of yet. That is slated for April, is it?
April 7 to 13 is their week, I think.
7 to 13, okay.
So, pressures,
Yep.
okay. So perhaps we could see this, what do we have, February and March. Okay, if we could see this on the, Sean, on the agenda for the first council in March then? Okay. Done on that, council, I've already done mine. Okay, council members, anything to report, observations? Show of hands, anything going? Nope.
I want
Yes?
to just express a shout out to Public Works for taking care of the water that was spilling down Ocean View, and that slick and that ice is gone. So thank you very much for doing that.
And I will do likewise and say our graffiti police are out there in force now. Thank you very much. Okay, committees, Councillor Bain, and let's build some momentum and try and get this to the end.
In other words, keep it short.
I must have had 80 emails this week.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Anyhow, we have the report about the memorial project. It's up for suggestions and the directions from council as we can. We've got the details of the project directions we've gone through. So getting to the nitty-gritty of it, the consensus was to have the memorial based around split granite rock that we could get supplied in Squamish at a reasonable price. The committee members that went up there to visit them were quite impressed with the quality of their product. Considered sort of a limestone and a granite. They figured granite would be the longest wearing and everything, and they could get the thing engraved into the stone for a nominal cost. The things we weren't sure about were the installation of it would have to go onto about a 6-inch concrete pad. And this is where we'd be turning to the Works Department if they're keen, willing, and able. We don't know what the price of that would be. But the installation, delivery and installation is about 500. The split granite rock with all engraving is estimated around in the neighborhood of 803. And we figure with all in, if we consider in-kind, or what do you call it, in-kind, but Public Works time involved and all, I put in there $2,500 would be the outside limit, but the committee has, since I wrote this, has said we should ask for 3, but with the hope of not getting anywhere near that. If council's agreeable to that, instead of giving up on some, oh, by the way, the location we're talking about is now in front of the village office by the flags. They've given consideration to Marjorie Meadows, and they thought that the more respectable place would be in the high visible, high traffic area going into the village office, especially on November 11th. Most people would be going by there and it would have a better impact. Of course, they've given up, the committee has given up on the idea of putting anything where the old highway water tank was supposed to have been removed to, it seems that's not happening in the near future. And in sort of second thoughts behind it, they think, you know, it probably wasn't the best place to do it anyhow because of traffic and pedestrians getting there would be difficult. Whereas in front of the office, it's very respectful because it's high visibility. It shows that the community really needs something about it rather than just sort of, oh, by the way. So if council is amenable to the suggestions, I would take it back to the committee and we can go forward on it with your advice and direction. The one thing that hasn't been determined, and much to Mayor McLaughlin's angst, there's been hordes of emails bouncing back and forth trying to find out what wording should be put on the cairn. So if you don't mind, I've got a little handout here. I think we've got enough for everybody. If you want to take one, if I can just get your indulgence on this to see which ones you would recommend, because there is no unanimity at all in the committee as to what would be the best choice. There's two. I only finished this afternoon, so I'm sorry it's on table, but just an example. All these suggestions, if you want to number them from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 from the top, we've the one at the top, nobody's first choice. Second one, nobody's first choice. Third one, one person's first choice. Fourth one person's first choice. Number 5 and number 6 are both one person's choices, but the only difference between 5 and 6 is in the first line, honors its veterans versus honors our veterans. So those are that's as close to a consensus I can get, but that's only 2, and it's not quite accurate. So if I could leave it with members of council or staff as well to mull it over and get back to me on it after they've given it consideration, we could move forward on this.
If I could, any questions? Yes? Yeah.
With respect to the location, I'm concerned about blocking of walkways. If we have it in the front garden area, are people going to stand on walkways blocking people from trying to either get to the hall or get to the office or coming out? It just seems like an awkward location that doesn't have easy access. There's a rail, there's the notice board sort of blocking the view of whatever is put there. So in order to actually have a full frontal view of the cairn that is proposed, one would have to stand, I presume, on the walkway that goes right up to the office steps, which would be an awkward location, unless you're talking about the other side of the garden, and then they're standing on the ramp walkway in front of a railing looking at the cairn. But anybody who's trying to get by, if there's people stopping, I don't know, it strikes me as a potentially awkward location. And I wanted to ask whether any consideration was given to the area above, like outside the hall, like all the bank of windows, and you've got that area, it's all the paving stones, and then you've got the mounds that kind of curve around. There's a big rock face there. Potentially the rock face could be engraved itself, maybe, I don't know. But that area has lots of room for people to stand around. If it was Remembrance Day and it was poor weather, you could even stand inside and stay dry and view the cairn. And plus you got the views in the distance. I don't know, was that looked at, or?
There was some consideration of sticking it somewhere along that pathway.
Mm-hmm.
The existing rock there, we had even considered a plaque to put on it, but we've given up on the plaque idea.
Mm-hmm.
because they tend to deteriorate where the engraved rock lasts longer. I should mention, by the way, the rock would probably be just to the bottom of a person's chest in height, so it's a substantial thing. And you don't have to get really close to see it and read it, presumably. Yeah, we haven't really talked about by the windows of Broughton Hall. Nobody really came up with that idea.
I was out there the other day in the sunshine. It was a beautiful location. I thought, oh, this would be good.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I'm concerned about people stopping and blocking walkways, and I thought maybe up top would be better with the views and everything else.
Yeah, I can bring it back to the committee if you prefer. Give them second thoughts on it.
Just a thought.
Yeah, the reason, one of the other reasons of being right out front was we felt being in the public eye and everything, there'd be less chance of vandalism. Because it's right, well, you can keep an eye on it while you're working. Money getting the backside.
There we go. Thank you, Councillor Bain. Here's what I would suggest, if I can get nods or hands up from my colleagues, that we receive your report and ask that you take these thoughts back to your committee, that in conjunction with staff you finalize the location of the cairn. This would be either to the window side of Broughton Hall as suggested by the CAO, or that with him an estimated size of the cairn, that you all stand there and throng and see if it works for you, but essentially it's where the flags are presently. Secondly, that the budget of 3,000 will come forward with the budget that the CFO is going to present in 2 weeks. And the pain of your wording, it's a little while before the work goes on in this. I'm thinking that somewhere in this, and I don't have the rotation of the village update here, that you may elicit the village feedback on this with choices of 1, 2, 3, and maybe a mock-up of something like this. Now you're putting, if your own committee can't make a call on this one, and a demonstrated call on this one, and I don't think council wants to weigh in on this just yet. I'm thinking somewhere down the road here when I, maybe the next meeting, when I figure out rotation, that you somehow take this to the community for feedback. Correct, Councillor Rabbit?
Yes.
That was the table pounding, yes? Good. So, the 1, 2, 3, it was to finalize the location with staff and try and find unanimity, the budget for 3,000. And my recommendation, which I think everybody's approving, is that, any one of us could say these are good recommendations, but whether the committee resonates, or if there is a very modest response, then I'd be happy with whatever the committee puts forward.
Okay, timeline, with budget considerations and everything, maybe I should ask staff, if we come to all these decisions and everything's agreed to, when feasibly would we have enough finances to proceed with this?
We have a couple of options. The budget will probably be adopted in April. So once the budget's adopted, then you have the okay to spend the money. If you needed it before that, it can be done as a council resolution. We've done that in the past. A council resolution in advance of the budget adoption.
Well, I'm also aware that it's not going to take long to get the whole project done with Public Works time. I can't account for. But as far as getting the cairn built and engraved and everything else like that, I think it's a short timeline, so I don't think we need a special council resolution on
Okay.
this. So we could wait until April if that would be better.
Right, when the budget's adopted, okay.
Are you fine with that, Councillor Green?
Yep.
I mean, it's sure we can afford $3,000 if you need it now. Okay. All right, moving on then. CFO work, item 10.
Bylaws, right.
Page 79.
Yes. So based on the budgets that we've looked at for water, sewer, and solid waste, and the directions that I received from council, I have attached the actual bylaws for the utility rates with a recommended 5% increase for water, 5% increase for sewer, and 1.5% increase for garbage and recycling. So we will have 3 readings of the bylaw is one of the options tonight for adoption at the next meeting. And then those rates are incorporated into the utility bills, which go out at the end of February. So I guess the recommendations are approve the 3 bylaws and give them 3 readings, or amend the bylaws and then give them 3 readings, or refer them back to staff for further revisions.
See you.
I just want to bring up that, I apologize, I forgot to share the good news story in the Vancouver Sun about our solid waste efforts. And it was duly noted there that in comparison to all of the other municipalities of Metro and indeed the province, Lions Bay produced the least amount of solid waste at 188 kilograms per person, versus Delta, for example, was the worst at 465 kilograms per person. Vancouver was close behind at 426. So, good job, Lions Bay.
Well done, Rita.
And now Delta started the Blue Bin project in the late 80s, and now they are the worst offenders.
I think we can get Stan to do a little something in the update for that.
I think that's something to be proud of.
It's on what?
That's something to be proud of. That's something we should have.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just,
yeah, well,
Absolutely.
100%.
shall we take that as a yes?
yeah, and I'm thinking of Neville's comments.
Comments for those.
What?
Be careful what you say, or you will be tasked with doing it. No problem. No, I'm happy to do it.
What's that term that
it's a
Neville
good-
has coined? Voluntold.
No.
There we go.
It's a good news story. I'm happy.
It's a really good news story, and it resonates.
Public Works Manager Jaffer and I will do a
Mm-hmm. Thank
dynamic
you,
job.
and there we go. Thank you. Thank you for offering. Thank you for bringing it to our notice. You know, the email would have been fine, but you know, right. Okay, so on this one, to go back to the utility user rates, just for, if there's no more discussion, then I'm prepared to start reading. No discussion? Okay. All right, moving first with Water Rates and Regulations Bylaw Number 2, 1971, Amendment Bylaw Number 557, 2019. 1971, not 17. The Council of the Village of Lions Bay, an open meeting assembled and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited for all purposes as Water Rates and Regulations Bylaw Number 2, 1971, Amendment Bylaw Number 557, 2019. 2, Schedule A attached to Bylaw Number 2, 1971, as amended, is hereby deleted, and the attached Schedule A is substituted therefore. This bylaw shall take effect upon adoption, and can we do 3 readings at once?
I'm not sure where you're reading from there.
You just have to read that.
Oh,
Just the resolutions are fine, I
you
think.
could have stopped me early on.
But we didn't want to
You're
interrupt.
so good at this.
You're on a roll.
All right,
Trying to figure out what you were doing.
you make me read everything else. Okay, fine, be that way. All right, can I have a motion?
So, 3 separate resolutions as set out in the agenda. With a separate resolution for each bylaw.
Well, I
It's-
think I beat the heck out of number 1.
Yeah,
Okay, so we've got a first, second, discussion, favor, good, done.
for second and third, sorry. You said for second? Yeah, for
And
second
third.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, number 2, sewer user, so abbreviated, sewer user rates bylaw number 122, 1984, amendment bylaw number 558, 2019. Can I have a motion? Thank you. A seconder, any discussion? First, second, and third readings. All in favor? Thank you. Last, garbage and recycling collection bylaw number 455, 2013, amendment bylaw number 559, 2019. This would be for first, second, and third readings. Can I have a motion? Thank you. A second. Any discussion? All in favor? This is third read. Good. Done. Passed. Okay, and whose quarter is it for the correspondence? With a time ability of almost seconds. Councillor Bean.
Okay, the first one outside, we've got Recycling Council of BC 45th Annual Zero Waste Circular Economy Conference. Sounds like we know what we're doing here anyhow. I don't know, it's a 3-day experience, if anyone's interested, I suppose. I don't have too many comments about it. Although on the side, I kind of wondered, are anybody ever going to talk about soft plastics and the difficulty in recycling and stuff? But I don't know. That's the only reason I'd go for it if I went. I don't want to sit through a 3-day thing listening, talking garbage.
I can tell you where to recycle soft plastic.
Sorry?
I can tell you where to recycle soft plastic and composites as well, crinkly plastics.
Oh, I'm thinking more farther down the line. Like I'm hearing that
To have
someone.
curbside pickup, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, what I'm thinking of is once the recyclers get it, what I'm understanding from the UK, they shipped it all off to China, and now China's not wanting to accept it anymore, and now the UK is wondering, what are we gonna do with our soft plastics? I think that's gonna come to us as well. So, what is the end goal of the soft plastics? I don't know. Anyhow, I
Where
think
does soft plastics go?
Well, they do make it into like, that planks that you can make decks out of and,
Mhm.
but maybe there's just too much. It's coming to banning of soft plastic bags. That's
Right.
what I think the end game really should be.
The fact that they won't recycle soft plastic is actually not true, because I've got a friend that actually runs a facility that makes those pellets, and he says he'll take any plastic out from his facility. It's more about people don't like to have to handle it. It's actually...
Let's,
That's-
So what do you do
okay.
for that?
You can take it to Safeway, you can take it to Encore.
Okay. so-
colleagues, I do have my eye on the clock. If I can mercilessly draw your attention, this is a 3-day conference in Whistler.
Any takers?
Encore.
3-day conference in Whistler. You can ask for a budget. Or you could be driving back and forth.
Well, I'm guessing there's not enough interest.
All right, shall we do a no response on that one? Thank you.
Well,
Yeah, North Bend, that sounds.
Okay, the next one is about pets. And essentially, it's about what to do with feral cats, licensing, and cat bylaws. I'm not aware that we have an issue with it, so maybe no response.
No response, thank you.
Feral cats.
All right, in closing strong here, I would be with the resident one.
Okay,
So on the next one, the food.
food matters. I don't know, we are signatory to it, but as I read through the whole thing, pardon the expression, but there's really nothing to sink your teeth into on here. They're just talking about concepts. Sorry. It's a compulsion.
Been waiting for 2.5 hours for that.
Not so. Anyhow, it seems like I don't want to minimize it, but, you know, if you, sorry, I almost said another one. I was going to say, I just can't see what the meat of the matter is on this one.
How about, I would ask if anybody's got a desire to go.
I'm out of town, so I.
It's not a no vote, it's a yes vote.
There we go.
So, for another, no appetite around
No
the table,
appetite,
so no
unless there's
response.
somebody with their hand up. Oh, you're just killing me.
I can't make it.
Okay, this is what it's going to be like all quarter. All right. Thank you for the general correspondence on Mr. Craig and the beach renewal. Which one is this of his letters? Thank you, CAO Dion. I have reached out, when I saw this and I saw subsequent responses that are not here, he's chosen to communicate with me directly, so I'm hoping to speak with Mr. Craig shortly, and I will bring that back into correspondence. So for this one, we'll just, can we just keep it in the correspondence as a place mark, or, I guess, well, it's either, actually, it's no response then.
Yeah.
I'll follow up. Okay. That takes care of correspondence. New business. Everybody keep your hands down. Good, thank you. Public questions, comments, there being none. We will close the meeting, and those who shouldn't be here won't be here. And if there are any other reasons to close the meeting? Nope, we're all here. Okay, we will be closing the meeting. That the meeting be closed to the public on the basis of matters to be considered under the following sections of the community charter. 91, a part of a council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one or more of the following. E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. J, information that it is prohibited or information that if it were presented in a document would be prohibited from a disclosure under Section 21 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Okay, we will now close the meeting.
Motion,
Permission to,
motion,
what?
just the
Oh,
motion,
motion to close.
second, and
Thank you.
vote.
Here we are coming out of in camera at 7 minutes to 11, and not a minute too soon. And can I have a motion to go back to the regular session? Thank you. And seconder, any discussion? All in favor? Good, thank you. And so we are back into the regular session. And from the closed session, CAO Dion has something to report. If you could do that first, please.
The council reports out that they approved a temporary aid agreement with the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District in respect of the Britannia Beach Volunteer Fire Department at the special meeting continuation on January 31st, 2019.
Thank you. And the other piece that we had tabled in the Feb 5th agenda was item staff A4, and this was from the Public Works Manager, which was a recommendation to award the Ocean View Drainage Study. And the recommendation was that council approve the award of the Ocean View Drainage Analysis and Engineering Design project to ISL Engineering and Land Services in the amount of $15,970, and that the CAO be authorized to execute contract documents in accordance with the scope of work required up to the amount of $15,970, not including GST, and that the work be funded from the Public Works operational budget. Yes.
Slight amendment to the second part of the resolution. After the words execute contract documents, insert comma amended to clarify maximum payments.
Thank you very much. Motion as amended. Thank you. Seconder, all in favor? Good. Pass on that. And now, can I have a motion to, there is no other business left, have a motion to close. Unanimous, and we are closed at 5:02. Lovely.